Regarding the FSOP grant for the 2019, you said that if you were a PI before, you couldn't compete as the lead. Is that for all competition, or all submissions, or you said the word different? So if it's a completely different type of project base and different scope, does that mean you can compete as the PI, or do you have to find an alternative PI?
It's all is this on? Yes, it is all submissions. So if you've ever received any FSOP awardees from 2015 until now, you're no
Okay.
longer eligible, regardless of scope, program priority area, any funding that was received from that particular authority, you're not eligible for as the PD.
Thank you.
Yep.
Stephen, Regulator Tan, is there a plan for sort of collecting the questions and answers and distributing summarized results in some way?
Yes.
Gotta get real close.
Got to get real close, swallow the mic. Yes, but probably not in the format you're thinking. So the challenge or the constraint that we have is that when somebody asks a question, generally the response, try to think of the legalese, but it's owned by the person who has asked that question. And then also we run into the issue where the question addresses a specific circumstance, but it's not intended to be broadly applicable. So what we do is we collect the information, we collect the questions, the answers, and then as you start to see the fact sheets that we release, we'll often include those questions and answers in there. So it's a little bit of a delayed mechanism to get that back out to you, but it's not just a summarized list.
So will the person who asked the question of the Regulator Tan receive a written response at some point?
No. So the Regulator TAN is intended to be a phone conversation. If there is a need or a desire for a written response, then we would handle that separately.
Okay. Just about the modified curriculum, we're going to be reaching out to new farmers, and in New Hampshire, believe it or not, they're from all over the world, some of the farmers, so it's not just Spanish, it's other languages too. And inspired by what I saw yesterday, the question is about the curriculum. Is it possible to do it, to take the exact text and slides and everything of the produce safety curriculum and split it up over more than a day? Can you do, will it still be acceptable if you do it like over a month or over longer?
There's nothing in the rule that prevents you from doing that, but I suspect Betsy may have an opinion.
Yeah, the way the PSA curriculum was designed was that as long as they receive all the modules, then it's fine. So if you want to divide it over a week, a month, a day, you know, whatever. We did it in a day. It was set up to be delivered in a day because when we did focus groups around the country, the growers didn't want to be away from the farm, and they requested it. But certainly for other audiences, it totally makes sense, and it's better for learning outcomes if it is delivered over time. The issue people have is keeping track of who comes. So for instance, one person tried to do it, or a group of people tried to do it at a meeting, and they broke the blocks up over time, and then trying to keep track of who was in the room over time became a real trial. But I know places like Indiana, the state of Indiana has these evening sessions that they do over the winter where people tend to be there every week, and that would be a great venue for doing it. So yeah, it absolutely can be delivered over time. Thank you. Yeah.
Also, I just wanted to add that back in September, we did a training in Costa Rica where there were approximately 70 people from across Latin America, 16 different countries, and that training, which was a train of trainer, took place in 5 days. So it took a long time to explain in detail how to deliver the information. And one of the things that we discovered is that, and people from all these countries expressed, is that this curriculum was developed for the US, not for Latin America. So there are things that should be addressed and changed in the future to make it more relevant and applicable to Latin America. But in general, I think it was a really good experience.
some of those things, she makes a good point, some of those things that came out are things like we reference EPA, we reference OSHA, we reference things that are not in international environments, those groups. And so we are in the process of making modifications, certainly to Lee Turner app questions and stuff like that to address that, because those are very US-centric.
Yeah, and some terminology, for example, here in the US, we say pesticides, and in Latin America, when you say pesticide, it's more related to herbicides, so you have to be more clear with those things. It's just minor details.
It's been known for a few years now, at least, well, I believe so, that one of the major flaws of the training is that it's a one-time deal. And frankly, after, a week after they take the training, they're not retaining much. That's my hypothesis, but it's never been tested. We don't have any impact data on that. I just wonder if that's something that's going to be important in the future. And also, is there any way, I mean, USDA has programs that, like pesticide credit programs, that encourage continuous lifelong training. We have nothing like that for produce safety. So the feeling is they got their certificate, they're done, goodbye, unless you really go out and hustle. So is there some way to build that into the system?
Thanks for the question. That's a good point. I think that's a good area where data should be collected. Obviously, the rule does not require them to go back for refresher training, not explicitly at least. So that may be a challenge. Excuse me? Is it possible for some resolution of that? I'd have to ask the folks that worked on the guidance for that subpart. I don't want to step into that.
I think it was back on September 28th, there was a webinar that was for educators regarding how the inspection program was going to go. And it was supposed to be recorded and put on the FDA's YouTube, and I have not been able to find that. So do you know if that's up, and if so, where?
When I go back to the office tomorrow, I'll ask about that, and then if there's a link, I can share that with Chris and Elizabeth, and they can share it broadly.
Yes, so the last I heard, it was still being reviewed by OC. So as soon as that's done, it will be posted. It's still being reviewed by legal.
Office of Compliance.
Maybe kind of specific, but there's a list of commodities that are rarely eaten raw, and that says that's the final statement. That is complete. Yet there's some errors in there, or not. For instance, I work with mushroom growers. Mushrooms are eaten raw, right? Well, there's like 17 different kinds of mushrooms, and some of them, like, you wouldn't want to eat a raw shiitake. Your face would get all broken out with dermatitis, and it would have no flavor. Yet I ask, there's no mechanism to, because I guess they're not grown enough to get the data from the data source on consumption. So is there any resolution to that?
So the data that was used to generate the list of rarely consumed raw produce is based on the National Health and Examination. National Health, and I'm going to butcher the name, but it's the NHANES survey. And so where there is not data, there was not data to make a decision. So, there are certainly things that are not on that list that people ask questions about. I hadn't thought about that, but taro is something that comes to mind where you literally can't eat it raw, right? So there's a lot of feedback about that. And there is a mechanism to address that. The rule has to be reopened. And I think in the preamble, we actually talk about the idea that if folks have data about a particular commodity, that we would welcome that data. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.